declared state of emergency, the meeting will be conducted in accordance with California Government Code 54953E, as authorized by resolution of the City Council. Please contact the City Clerk at cityclerk@mountainview.gov to obtain a copy of the applicable resolutions. All members of the EPC are participating in this meeting by video conference with no physical meeting location. Members of the public wishing to observe the meeting may do so live by joining at mountainview.legistar.com, on YouTube at mountainview.gov/YouTube, and on Comcast Channel 26. As noted in the meeting agenda, members of the public may provide oral comment during the public comment periods of each item by joining the Zoom webinar with the meeting ID of 853-0070-5240. Emails and voicemail messages received by 5 p.m. were forwarded to the EPC. All votes will be taken by roll call vote. And now I'll ask the EPC clerk to take the roll call. Ms. Howard?
Commissioner Dempsey?
Here.
Commissioner Gutierrez?
Here.
Commissioner Haymeyer?
Here.
Commissioner Nunez?
Here.
Commissioner Clark? Not here at the moment. And Vice Chair Yin?
Here.
And Chair Cranston?
Here. Thank you. So first item on the agenda is the review of the meeting minutes from the EPC meeting of March 23rd, 2022. First, are there any questions or comments or changes requested by commissioners? Seeing none. We'll move to public comment. Would any member of the public on the line like to provide comment on the minutes? If so, please click the raise hand button in Zoom or press *9 on your phone. Phone users can mute and unmute themselves with *6. The EPC clerk will start the timer and let you know when your time is up. Ms. Warren, are there any people wishing to speak on the minutes?
I am seeing none.
And we will bring it back to the commission. So any other discussion, or do I have a motion to regarding the minutes? Commissioner Haymeyer.
I'll move to approve the meeting minutes from March 23rd as submitted by staff.
Do I have a second? Vice Chair Yin?
I will second that motion.
Okay. And the clerk can take the roll, please.
Commissioner Dempsey?
Aye.
Commissioner Gutierrez?
Aye.
Commissioner Haymeyer?
Aye.
Commissioner Nunez?
Aye.
Commissioner or Vice Chair Yin?
Aye.
And Chair Cranston?
Aye. Minutes pass. And so we move on to the next item, which is oral communications. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons wishing to address the EPC in any matter that is not on the agenda. Speakers are allowed to speak on any topic for up to 3 minutes during this section. State law prohibits the Commission from acting on non-agenda items. Would any member of the public on the line like to provide comment on the non-agenda items? If so, please click the raise hand button in Zoom or *9 on your phone. Phone users can mute and unmute themselves with *6. The clerk will start the timer and let you know when your time is up. Do we have any people wishing to speak on?
I am seeing none.
Commissioner Gutierrez?
Yes, I just, for the record, let the record reflect that Commissioner Clark joined at 7:04.
See him. Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry about that, everyone.
Okay. Then we will bring it back to the commission for item number 5, a public hearing on a commercial development at 653 to 405 San Antonio Road and 2585 to 2595 California Street. Do any commissioners want to make any disclosures regarding contacts with the applicant or visits to the site? I visited the site. Commissioner Haymeyer?
Similarly, I visited the site.
Commissioner Gutierrez,
I also visited the site.
Vice Chair Yin,
I've made a site visit. Thank you.
Commissioner Dempsey,
I've made a site visit.
Commissioner Nunez,
Site visit, no contact from the developer.
and Commissioner Clark.
Same site visit.
All right, so we will start off with a staff presentation by Rebecca Shapiro, Deputy Zoning Administrator.
Thank you, Chair Cranston. I'm just going to take a moment to share my screen. So greetings this evening, commissioners. The item before you is an EPC public hearing to consider recommendations to the City Council for commercial development at 365 to 405 San Antonio Road and 2585 to 2595 California Street, which staff refers to as the Merlin-Geyer Phase 3 development. The project site is located at the southeast corner of San Antonio Road and California Street, and the project, if approved, would complete the build out of the west side of San Antonio Center. The project site is across the street from a few different recently developed or proposed higher intensity residential mixed-use developments. And the gatekeeper application for the Phase 3 project was authorized in December 2019, which allowed staff to begin reviewing the application before you for an approximately 182,000 square foot commercial office development with ground floor retail and up to 150 square feet of transferable development rights from the LASD TDR program. During the gatekeeper hearings, early DRC review, and study sessions before the Environmental Planning Commission and Council, early project feedback was heavily focused on design. Consistent feedback included concerns about the original design being monolithic, overly rectangular, and ordinary, with decision makers requesting curved walls, distinctive design at a key gateway corner, high quality pedestrian environment with naturalistic landscaping, and revisions to the project to address setback compliance. EPC and Council generally supported early staff recommendations for the precise plan amendments necessary to implement the TDR program in the San Antonio Precise Plan and to facilitate city approval and development exceptions for projects seeking to use additional TDR square footage in the plan area. As a result of the clear early design direction, the applicant completely redesigned the project with a unique curvilinear form, corner art piece, an elevated corner outdoor space for office users, as well as additional upper floor balcony areas, wider sidewalks, and covered active spaces on site. The updated design employs a complementary stone material to create some synergy between the new project and the existing adjacent office buildings, and incorporated new materials to add warmth and pop to the ground floor storefronts as compared to the original proposal. Excluding the exceptions needed to use the proposed TDR square footage, which is described in more detail within the staff report, the current design generally complies with the existing precise plan regulations, but does also require a provisional use permit to allow the office use. As noted in the staff report, the site plan provides fully compliant sidewalks on all frontages, and the minimum widths that are referenced here on the screen are for the entirely unimpeded dimension of the sidewalk areas. But the on-site site design, again, as shown here, is fairly permeable. So there are semi-regular breaks in the streetscape landscape, and those areas provide additional paved area that effectively widens the public sidewalks at frequent intervals. And these breaks also provide easy points of access to the on-site active spaces of the project. These active spaces provide a mix of additional pedestrian circulation paths, as well as outdoor gathering space next to the building. DRC and staff have reviewed the overall redesign in context, especially to the previously provided city feedback, and recommended approval with design conditions noted in the staff report for areas where continued design refinement is recommended. The project proposal includes removal of 5 heritage trees, which are shown in the upper diagram on screen by the red filled circles. All 5 of these tree removals are needed in order to build the TDR project, and one of the trees also conflicts with public sidewalk improvements as well as being diseased. None of these heritage trees are in good condition, and none of them were found by the project arborist or the city arborist to be suitable candidates for transplantation. Ultimately, the project proposal does include a minimum of 18 new tree plantings, which include 15 36-inch box trees, which would exceed the city minimum. And ultimately, the proposed tree plantings will result in on-site tree canopy that exceeds the existing condition on the property. As noted earlier, the project includes amendments to the San Antonio Precise Plan that are specifically intended to implement the LASD TDR program, as well as to incorporate regulatory language in the Precise Plan that supports city review and approval of any project seeking to use TDR square footage, including the one before you tonight. The staff recommended language for these amendments is modeled on the recently adopted TDR language that was included in the East Wisman Precise Plan, where TDR projects have been proposed, but also includes some additional updates which are needed because the sending site for the TDR program is located in the San Antonio Precise Plan area. Staff has prepared an addendum to the San Antonio Precise Plan certified EIR to review any potential environmental impacts from the Precise Plan amendments and the development project. This addendum document found that there would be no new or substantially worsened impacts from this project than what was identified in the previously certified EIR. The staff recommendation in full is shown on this slide, and this concludes staff's presentation. We're available, as well as our environmental consultant team, for any questions that the EPC may have, and the applicant team is also here tonight with a brief presentation. David Geiser from Malone Geyer will kick things off for the applicant when you're ready for that presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we bring up the applicant's presentation and speakers?
So Rebecca, this is Dave Geiser with Malone Geyer Partners, Managing Director. I believe you're going to share screen with Andy Neff to run some of our graphics. Great, thank you. And I'll get started while he gets ready. Again, my name is Dave Geiser. I'm Managing Director of Malone Geyer Partners. We were last before this body in fall of 2020. We're here to give both you and the City Council an early look at the project and the design features. And the main takeaways from those meetings, both with you and the City Council, were that the city, they thought that the building would need more work, need more punch. That we wanted to create a more inviting pedestrian environment. We really wanted us to comply with all the site setback regulations. Thought the building was too high. But more importantly, we're told that we didn't want the same old boring office building at this corner because it's a key intersection and entrance to Mountain View. The City Council wanted an iconic signature building at this corner, not just a plain old boxy office building, and also to use curves to soften the building edges. And so we've spent the last year and a half or so redesigning this building and taking a real, a new look at going back to the drawing board and trying to really come up with something that met the expectations of the city, the EPC, and the City Council. What our architects with Gensler are going to show you, this is Darren Fulbright, Nick Allen, are the results of those efforts. And you've been given a sneak preview by Rebecca, but we're going to get a little bit more in depth into that. And again, where we're using different materials to soften the upper a portion of the building, create additional setbacks, reduce the height, and again, increase the pedestrian experience at the ground level. We think we've really gone far in achieving those goals. In fact, we've met with the DRB and staff over 3 times in the last through last fall, again to get their input and make the necessary adjustments they thought were necessary to achieve this design as well. And so with that, and I guess lastly, I would say, we're enthusiastic participants in the TDR program, and participate with the city and the LASD, the Los Altos School District, in contributing over $20 million with the approval of this project towards the new school and joint use park that's being planned for San Antonio Center. That'll happen with the approval of this project. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Andy Neff and to Daryl Fulbright with Gensler, and take it away, guys.
Thanks, Dave. Hopefully you guys can see my screen with the Village at San Antonio Phase 3, and we'll share a quick video rendering of the project.
And I'm Daryl Fulbright with Gensler, and this process has really created a much better project at the end of the day. And so key things that we did, we set back that ground floor to really make the public realm more impactful. We curved the facade and broke up the scale of the facade to make it feel more like a residential project than an office project. We used biophilic design strategies to both bring landscaping on the building and to curve the building to have it more iconic. We created a very strong feature at the corner. You can see this glass feature that really lines up at the corner and provides a gateway into the overall community. And then we also stepped the massing up on the building to really set back the building to make it feel like it's more a 3-story building with a top on it than it is the full building that it is. So we spent lots of time to articulate the building, both from a ground plane and from an overall perspective, to make it more pedestrian friendly and more connected to the community. A lot of porosity in the project brings people through the retail areas from both the inside of the project out to the street. And it has a very nice character to it, a nice scale to it and character to it. And you can see it compared to the existing buildings. And you can see that facade there. There's also a feature corner on that side that connects to our interior courtyard where a lot of the pedestrian activity happens as well. And we've even moved back the facade on the Silicon Way interior street to provide more pedestrian connections there as well. This jewel box retail that you see here at the ground plane was also part of that activity, both at the street and at the courtyard area. And you can see how the building just feels a much smaller scale. It's bringing the larger building on the right down to a smaller scale to the left. Again, breaking up the retail at the ground plane to give it more interest and activity. We really think this is going to be a great retail location tied to some of the other retail on the site. And here you can see how that we're using frit on the glass on the upper floors to cut down the glare and cut down the scale of that building up above. And here, as you can see, it does feel more like it's part of the residential buildings across the street to the north than it is the office buildings to the south. Happy to answer any questions.
So next we'll open up to EPC questions first, and then after that out to public comment. So Commissioner Gutierrez.
Yes, I have a quick question. In terms of the windows for the second floor on up, are those all see-through or will they have some privacy shading as well?
Typically in the office buildings, we will have privacy shading in all the windows, for sure, interior shading.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And Vice Chair Yin.
One question about the retail heights. I noticed in the presentation that was on print that the chart stated 14-foot minimum ceiling heights for the ground floor. In the elevations, I know the ground floor changes a little bit, the heights, but I think some of the retail is like 10 feet or less in certain areas, some of the ground floor heights. So I was just wondering which was correct.
No, it's a 14-foot minimum and it goes up to, I think, 18 feet. Nick, are you on? Can you verify that as well? I guess Nick is not one of the guests here. I don't have that chart in front of me, but it's not. I think it's a minimum of 14 feet and goes down to around 18 feet as the site slopes.
Yeah, it does. I can share the screen that I have up
Perfect.
on the elevation real quick.
Thank you, Andy.
Yeah, and while you do that, Andy, in answer to the question, I think what the elevations show where you see a smaller height, I think is a height to adjacent grade, not necessarily the full clear height. Because there is changing slope across the site, that sort of distance measure varies depending on what side of the property that you're on. But I think the finished floor is held at the same height across the building would be my understanding. I'll let Gensler fill in. And so the minimum heights should be compliant across the project, and in certain locations will exceed it.
The other thing that we're doing is we're doing a flat slab concrete design. So we don't have any beams coming down to impede that clear height space. So that helps us maximize the height as well.
So the finished floor height on the ground floor is a minimum of 14 feet from floor to ceiling.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, in the elevations, I can see it's like from, even if it's from grade then to the second floor, let's say one of them says, oh, I forgot. Oh, sorry.
Zoom in here, it's 15'5". So it is from the adjacent grade. So we do step the slab, and I'll kind of highlight that on a site plan here. We do have to step the slab because it isn't flat. The site isn't flat. You'll notice that.
Right, two places here.
Yeah, we do break it a couple spots. So
you step the second floor?
Step the first floor. So the slab does step down as you go.
It's a minimum of 14 foot on the right, and then it steps down and gets bigger as you go to the left as the site slopes down to the left.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess I'm just concerned with the finished floor height of the retail to their ceiling height. The reason I just ask is, and also to ensure that the sidewalk is the same elevation as the ground floor of the retail. We're not stepping down into the retail, right?
No, what's happening here, and if I guess I can annotate here, maybe. No, basically, essentially what's happening on retail 4, which is to the right, that has a slight step inside, but the grade on the outside is a continuous slope. So everything meets grade. It just needs that slope because we can't slope the inside of the floor to match the sloping grade on the outside. So it's flat, then a slight step, flat, slight step, flat, so that when it meets the grade on the outside, that is a continuous slope.
It's just flush it's flush to the sidewalk.
Correct. Yeah. So you can kind of see if I zoom in here, we actually pick up some of the grades in the solid portions of the walls at the retail. So it's slightly sloping down on this exterior. No steps in the sidewalk. It's flush with the exterior sidewalk. But
everything's flush, so it's going to feel very natural.
Yeah.
Okay. I just remember seeing somewhere from the grade to the second floor was only like less than 14. I don't know where that is now. I'm sorry. And I just wanted to ask about that. But if you say the minimum interior ground, the floor to the ceiling is 14 feet minimum, and it's the same elevation as the sidewalk, then that works. What was I looking at here? Oh, maybe it's the floating jewel box, the bagels.
Yeah.
I know that's not necessarily going to be a bagel shop, but that one's a little bit shorter, right?
It is a little bit shorter. I think it's more like 12, but it's considered to be more like a pavilion, right? So it's not really, it's going to have a very small footprint. So we don't need as big of floor heights in there as we do on the bigger spaces.
And a smaller footprint tenants, so that those tenants are, 800 square feet or 600 square feet, so they don't require the full 14-foot clear height.
That's correct.
Okay, and then so the 12-foot then is it Silicon Way? There's 12-foot from grade to second floor is 12. I think it's Silicon Way. It's a sheet.
It's this one, A1 4.03. This is actually the office entry at 12 foot. But all the retail is at 14 foot.
Yeah, because the grade slopes down, so all the retail is out on the street, and that's where we pick up on the grade change to get that additional height.
Got it. Okay, thanks for clarifying that for me.
No problem.
Commissioner Dempsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I have two questions. The first is you have kind of an unusual parking setup here. And I was wondering if you could, using pictures, because it'll be easier for me to follow, walk me through exactly how sort of the traffic and parking flow is going to work with this building.
So I'll take you to the first.
Well, while they're pulling up those images, I'll let you know that when we built the first phases of the office buildings 1 and 2, we actually, in the 4-story subterranean parking structure, we created blockouts or knockouts is what they're called, so that if we ever did build a future building 3, we would be able to access that building through buildings 1 and 2 parking structures by simply knocking out those panels in the parking structure and connecting to the adjacent floors. And I think that's what Andy's going to show you.
Yeah, this right here is the entryway to phase 2 underneath the buildings in the office building that's directly adjacent. And I will pull up a section to show you that there is connection under Silicon Way with the 3 floors that are adjacent in phase 2 of the office building.
So if I was coming to work, I'd drive down San Antonio, pull into Silicon Way, and then kind of pretty swiftly thereafter turn into the parking in the existing office building structure.
Correct.
I would go down and I could park there, or I could drive underneath my own building, park there, and then I would just take a lift up, be at work, and then when I was done, just reverse and we're home.
Correct.
Correct.
And that's for most of the parking spaces. We also share parking with the above ground structure that's located across the plaza from the soon to be 3 office buildings. And so some of the overflow parking is located in the above ground structure.
I assume the parking is going to be sort of gated and controlled because it's all for the businesses, right?
So it's not only gated. It's not only gated to get into the first ground floor level, the B1, the first subterranean level. It's gated from there on down. We actually have an opportunity to share parking with the hotel and valet on the B1 level, and then it's further gated, restricting people going down to the floors below that. So yeah, there's quite a complicated gating and key card system that allows people access, and again the office tenants keep a lot of security in mind as well, so that there's a lot of security involved in letting the people down into those gates and also between the different floors and between the different buildings.
I'll give voice to what a theoretical concern might be, and I'm sure smarter people than me have thought about this and it isn't going to happen. But if you've got a large number of cars all trying to come down Silicon Way to turn quickly and then park, I would hope we wouldn't end up in a situation where you have a lot of people actually kind of backed up out onto San Antonio, all waiting to turn right, because that parking structure is gated. What assurances can you give us that we're not going to end up like losing a lane on San Antonio during 8:45 in the morning when everybody's trying to get back to work?
Well, fortunately, we've already been able to test that with the occupation of the first 2 office buildings with Facebook. Not only do they bus a lot of their people to the site at a bus stop located over on Piketty, but what they have guards posted at those stops in the morning. So for the key hours, if they need to open the gate and leave the gate just up and check people's IDs as they're coming into, they're posted there to do that. Fortunately, we haven't had a problem, or they haven't had a problem with queuing. That because the gates are at the bottom of those ramps, we have additional queuing length. By the way, there's 2 locations. You not only come in off Silicon, you come off Data or Disk Drive as well. So there's 2 access locations off San Antonio Road, and then those are also accessed interior of the site as well. That there's plenty of queuing to prevent that from happening. In fact, it hasn't happened.
And remind me, is this building going to have a TDM imposed on it?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
The other thing to keep in mind is that the new gate systems now, I don't know if you guys have this where you guys park, but there's literally a signal, a strip on your car, and it has a sensor up above. So you're not holding off, to get your card out of your pocket and hold it up to a little thing. It's automatic. It senses your car when you pull up and the gate automatically goes up. So that helps as well.
That's great. I just had one more question, Mr. Chair, if you would indulge me. I wanted to know, so I noted in the analysis that the sale of the 150,000 feet for the sake of LASD would net that district around $20 million, give or take, for the purchase of new school land. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So I don't know as much about the TDR program. You probably know much more. How much money does the school district need to collect in toto in order to purchase that property? Like, how much more office space do we need to sell into the TDR program so that we can buy that school ground that we need to buy and the parkland that's associated with it? Like, how close are we? Are we real close? Are we a long way away? Like, where are we?
The short answer is the property has already been purchased. So LASD has purchased a little over 11 acres of land that's at the northeast corner of San Antonio Center, 2 acres of which the city is under contract and has purchased for a city park in addition to the school site. So the land has been purchased, but the TDR program is effectively backfilling the outlay of funds for that LASD has expended for purchasing the property. And the TDR program is capped at 610,000 square feet, so no more than that can be sold. And so to the extent that all of them are sold, that's the money that will come from the TDR program to backfill the purchase.
So
our project represents about 25% of that.
So the additional money that's raised through the sale of the remainder of the 600,000, that ends up backfilling the district, which then I assume is helping support the construction of the buildings that will eventually go on top of it, right?
If there is LASD staff that has joined the meeting, they can probably speak a little bit more to the mechanics. But I believe that the construction pots are a little bit different than the property acquisition pots, but that the TDR program funds, if all of them are sold, will go a long way to covering the property purchase.
Thank you.
Commissioner Clark.
Thank you, Chair. I had a question, going back to, I think, the 2020 discussion. One of the key features that council requested was the, as you highlighted, the curve design, the key, paying a lot of attention to that key corner of the project, which you've done. And another item that came up was how pedestrians sort of get through the project and penetrate the project. And we had talked a little bit about or asked, would it be possible for someone entering a building at the corner, maybe to a retail store, to be able to communicate through the project and out the other end, or to be able to access multiple retail sites without having to go back outside into the sidewalk. And I was looking at the project plans and the first floor in particular, and I know I see a number of different retail spots, some office, and I was just trying to get a sense for whether internally there are hallways and things that maybe a member of the public could walk down and transit through that first floor and into the project, or into other tenants, or retail tenants, or even an office if they work there, or if it's pretty much cordoned off, or if it will depend on what the tenants themselves want in the end.
Yeah, Mr. Clark, I remember having that conversation about the ground floor and trying to make it more permeable. But we found out that when we reduced the size of the ground floor to give more space to pedestrians around the outside of the building, especially on Californian and the pedestrian walkway, by the time we ended up with the loading corridors necessary to serve those tenant spaces, the loading cores necessary to serve the office building, and the loading areas and mechanical rooms themselves, we really weren't left with any room to offer an opportunity to cut through the middle of that building and reach, let's say, the interior corner of the site. And so we then focused on just creating that experience, that pedestrian experience around the outside of the building, and then creating that retail edge along the streets. And then as you come through, then spending our time focusing on that pedestrian experience by the Jewel building and the retail or the pedestrian plaza that exists along the along the promenade there. and the office entry coincident or complementary to the plaza that already exists there too. So that it was no longer feasible to create any kind of a connection through the building for those tenants.
And I think that you want people to walk on the outside to really liven the project and to engage the retail and to walk by all of the retails so that the retail gets as much foot traffic as possible. So from an urban perspective, I think you're better off having folks being seen as people drive around and being engaged with all of the retail on the retail fronts. And so we provided a really nice walkable experience on the outside to walk through and around the building and on all sides. So I think that's a preferable one to try to keep the retailers engaged with the ground plane as well.
Yeah, I definitely get it. I know those folks need loading zones, and I have to compliment you on the additional pedestrian facilities and the experience around the outside of the building. It's just hard for me to predict where most pedestrians will originate. If they're going to be coming from some of the parking structures, or if they're going to be coming from some of the other retail tenants that are in different phases of the site, and then how they would, what the most common paths of travel will be. But I agree. It looks like you've created a decent experience here, and I think activating those spaces, even the ones that are along San Antonio, is important. So thank you for sharing how this evolved since 2020 on that aspect.
Commissioner Nunez.
Awesome. Thank you, Chair Cranston. So I have two questions. The first involves bicycle parking. So we have a Caltrain station pretty close by to that building, and we have some pretty prominent bike lanes in that area as well. So I'm curious to hear from the developer, what is the expected demand that you guys are gonna see in this building from bicyclists wanting to park there, and what have you done to meet that demand? And then as if a bonus has been considered around that, anything to encourage more bicycle utilization beyond just the expected demand.
Do you want to grab that, Daryl, or I'll be more than happy to answer?
Go ahead, Dave.
So what we've done, in addition to buildings 1 and 2, the lower levels, we provide actually bike storage, bike lockers, and bike showers for people coming to the building. In addition to all of the bike lockers and bike racks along the promenade and within the phase 1 and 2 of the project, we're providing a plenty of bike lockers and bike racks all around the building to encourage the bicyclists to use the site. When the site was originally developed, we had to dedicate an additional frontage along both San Antonio Road and California for the bike lanes that you see there now, so that we enhance the bike connectivity and the bike grid for connectivity along California and San Antonio roads. So fully compliant with code, but again, I think we've gone above and beyond with the additional bike lockers, racks, showers, storage that we have and integrated into the site.
So does that distinguish between bicyclists that are working in the office buildings and parking there during the workday and, like bicycle pedestrian customers of the retail sites?
It sure does.
Yeah, the project will include a mix of both the secure bike room, which serves the office tenants, and visitor bike racks at surface levels around the site. And I believe cumulatively there'll be a minimum of around 50 spaces split between those two groups, and that's all sort of outlined and required pursuant to the project conditions of approval.
All right, awesome. And then that's really helpful, and I really appreciate that. Thank you. The second question I had just had to do with, I did notice on, I think Rebecca, was your presentation, the one titled Pedestrian Environment. There was a picture, and I think I also saw it around the video. So I just wanted to know outdoor seating was a conscious kind of feature of the building, or if it's more just like part of the rendering and it really depends on the tenants.
No, I think it's absolutely critical that we get outdoor seating here to, again, to liven that experience and make it feel used and occupied. So we've got a couple of great seating areas. We've got one, if you go back to the site plan, Andy.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go, right there. So we've got a fixed seating area both here on the left along San Antonio, and then we've got fixed seating areas around the Jewel Box along the promenade in California Street. So that's what we see as given seating. And if we get a restaurant or two in here, then we'd even see more. So that would be like a minimum seating that we would see going forward.
What you're also not seeing is right in here, these browns are integrated benches within our planters and landscaping. So kind of further emulating these landscape pods or amoebas that you're seeing here as well.
And one of the things that we'll continue to have a conversation with the developer about is the mix of those improvements that they provide as sort of the base project condition, and that's connected to discussions at DRC and project design conditions, just because we want to make sure that there's a good mix of amenities that will be available to pedestrians in these areas, regardless of what the eventual tenants are.
Yep, awesome, cool. Thanks a lot.
Commissioner Gutierrez?
Yes, thank you. Can we go to the main, to the first presentation, please, with the facade?
The facade? All right. Share the screen.
Thank you, sir. So the signage there, I think it's Gensler. Is the signage for any business that's going to be operating here going to be at that specific location, or will it be where?
So the signage shown in the rendering is just it's a little bit of the artful presentation of the building. Ultimately, this building will be managed through a master sign program, which will be reviewed with conformity with precise plan regulations. I should remember what those are off the top of my head right now, but I don't. But it may not end up being exactly there.
The intent is to have minimal office signage and very, very elaborate retail signage. So most of the retail signage you'll see will be more at the ground plane. We want to be very strategic with the signage we place up on the building.
And I believe, if I remember the site plan well enough, there's a monument sign that is proposed within a planting area at the corner of San Antonio Road and Silicon Way. And traditionally, what we've seen in the
right
office developments here in San Antonio Center is that to the extent there is office signage, it goes on the monument signs.
But if we get there's a very large tenant, typically they'd like a sign on the building, at least one.
And those very finite locations are all spelled out in the master sign program.
Yep.
Thanks, everyone.
Yep.
Vice Chair, and I'm going to do some questions and then I'll pick up you. Some of these are follow-ups to other questions that are asked. The connected parking. I know this is a question for Becca or the applicant. It's my understanding that phase 2 is no longer owned by Merlin Geyer. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Okay. What is in place? I'm sure the staff has looked at this, but what's in place to ensure ongoing and continued access to the parking if for some reason there's a falling out between the current owner of the underground garage and Merlin Geyer in the future?
There's an existing reciprocal easement agreement, access agreement that runs with the property that encompasses not only phase 1, 2, and this future phase 3.
And that can't be changed by any party?
No, it can be changed by all parties in agreement, but it cannot be changed by one party.
Rebecca, in the staff report, it mentions that the 212,000 square feet of additional office space is in the other area, but in the earlier presentation, you mentioned that there'd still be there's a change in the total office space. I was of the impression that the TDR moved the developments in one area into another, and it didn't necessarily mean that the entire amount was still available. Is that inaccurate, or?
Are you referring to TDR square footage or to the office development cap in the precise plan area? I'm sorry, I'm not sure I 100% understand.
The office development cap.
So, apologies if I created any confusion. I think when I was speaking to additional floor area in my presentation, I was speaking to the additional floor area that's going to be allowed in this project by virtue of the TDR purchase. And the precise plan amendments to allow an exception to the office development cap that applies to this particular master plan area that the project site is located in is something that would allow more office development at this particular location than is currently permitted by the San Antonio precise plan. But that office area would not cause an overall exceedance of the 600,000 square foot cap that is still in place for the precise plan area as a whole. So the roughly 200,000, 212,000 square feet that's noted in the staff report is the amount of remaining office area that could be developed in the overall precise plan area if this project is built under the 600,000, the higher 600,000 office development cap.
That was the second question. And then on the development agreement being requested for 7 years instead of 2, 7 years instead of 2 is touched on extremely briefly in the staff report. Is that something that we've done? Is there any precedence for that? Why was, and since the zoning administrator is here, why did she feel that that was acceptable? It seems a very large change to me.
Well, before maybe our zoning administrator steps in, I will say that 7 years, there is absolutely precedent. We don't see a huge number of development agreement requests on projects, but I think the last 2 at least asked for at least 7 years. And Ms. Williams, I don't know if you have additional flavor you could add to that response.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would echo what Ms. Shapiro just said, and ultimately, a development agreement is an agreement between the city and a developer, and the terms are negotiated, and the negotiated terms that are proposed were 7 years.
My question is more, I'm not really interested in setting a precedent. So is there, it sounds like there is some precedent for this recently, so this would not necessarily be a new thing.
Correct. This DA term does not set any new precedent.
That's correct. Each development agreement is looked at individually based on the individual development project that it would be related to.
Thank you. And then can you pull the floor plan for the first floor back up that shows the retail space? So while that's being pulled up, a great deal of time was spent in the original development of the San Antonio precise plan to encourage encourage the plaza area and ultimately make that a space that people want to use. And I think we all have different thoughts on why that hasn't occurred yet, but what I was questioning was the choice and a question to the developer of whether the retail space, what you call retail space 1, out on San Antonio Road, which is the farthest from anything in the Central Plaza area, is in fact the best location, and if the developer would consider exchanging that for the ground level 1 or ground level space that's actually the closest item in proximity to the rest of the plaza. It seems disconnected, and part of the goal of the precise plan was to get that much larger extended plaza activated, and so it's not clear to me why that corner wouldn't be the one with the retail space as opposed to the one that's over along San Antonio Road, which is in fact the farthest from foot traffic down a quieter Silicon Way. So,
this is Dave Geiser with Merlot Geyer. What we found is that, well, our experience for years has told us that these tenants, retail tenants in particular, they need desire street frontage. And so our most desirable locations along in the project are the ones that are along San Antonio Road, starting up at the corner of El Camino in San Antonio with the shop buildings that are there, down to where the Starbucks is, where the restaurant Paul Martin's was, where the bank is located now in office building number 1. And again, we expect these corner retail opportunities along San Antonio and California to be the most sought after retail locations. The fact there's plenty of parking within the center, but that the tenants are seen from the tens of thousands of cars passing by daily to see their storefront, to see their signage. It's the most desirable location. Additionally, we located the office entrance off of the plaza, similar to where the other office entrances are on the plaza. So while there's additional retail face in the plaza, our goal was to have all these office tenants, as they come to work, as they leave work, and during the lunch hour, they're walking through the plaza and exposed to all of the retail tenant spaces that are on the plaza. So that was intentional, that we located the where all those hundreds and thousands of office tenants are going to be walking to and from is through the plaza. And then we expect them to as they have been, enjoy the plaza during the day, as well as the rest of the public. But during the week, those office tenants come out of those office buildings, fill up the plaza, and are exposed to the retail tenants that are on that plaza.
Okay. I understand what you're saying. And then last question was, and I didn't have a chance to listen to the council meeting. But maybe staff or anybody else can. What makes create an iconic signature building that takes advantage of the key location on the intersection? What's the definition? And maybe Vice Chair Yin can chime in. What makes a architectural building iconic? Because this doesn't feel iconic in my lexicon as I look at it. So what does that mean, iconic?
If you want, I can chime in. I think what it means is that it stands out and differentiates itself from its surroundings and its immediate surroundings. And so in this context, it is iconic. I think your more traditional vision of iconic would be something like the Eiffel Tower, right? Because it sticks out of everything in Paris. And so what we try to do is to not only comply with all of the setbacks and the guidelines, but create a unique architecture that is of itself unique to this neighborhood. And I think that's what makes it iconic within its specific context.
Okay. Staff have addition of iconic?
I think the only other thing I'd add is that, design is a squidgy thing, and sort of something that feels iconic or special or unique to one person may not hold the same sentiments in another person. I think in the case of something like the Eiffel Tower, that is something that is entirely different from its surroundings, both in its scale and its design. And if that has a particular purpose, I think in this particular context, what I would gather from the feedback that I've heard and reviewed is that folks were searching for something that felt unique, but the sort of the flip side of that is not having something that feels completely alien to the space around it. It's a delicate line to walk at a property like this.
Well said, Rebecca.
Thank you, Vice Chair Yin.
I think I might be inching into comments instead of questions. So is that okay at this point?
We need to get public comment before we go into discussion.
Then I will hold.
Other questions, Commissioner Gutierrez?
Yes, thank you, sir. So I have a quick question, just going back to what Commissioner Dempsey had raised. I understand there's someone from the Los Altos School District here as well. Is that true, or did I mishear?
So I am looking at the attendee list now. One of the sort of key consultants for Los Altos School District does appear to be in attendance. I'm not seeing our TDR program representative with LASD here tonight. I know he was going to try to attend, but something may have popped up.
Okay, so then as a follow-up, would it be possible to follow up on Commissioner Dempsey's question regarding funding and where this goes in light of that funding situation that LASD has in general? That way, at least we have a good idea of where the school district stands in terms of money allotment towards construction in general. I'm not sure if Trustee Spicer and the rest of the group from LASD have already voted on a form of payment in general, but I think just to have that background information would be helpful for the new commissioners and for myself as well, in my humble opinion. So, thanks.
Hello. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, Peter Ingram, who was just promoted from the audience, is the consultant I was referring to. He may be able to shed a little bit of light, at least as far as sort of where LASD is in the process.
Thank you. Peter Ingram. I'm a community development consultant working with the district, and I've been working on the TDR program for more years than I can remember now. Your question's a good one, and I'm happy to try to help fill in information. So the original concept was that if we were limited to 610,000 square feet and we set a price for the TDR that was perceived as attractive to the development community, and we worked closely with the city staff for a long time on figuring out the sending site, receiving sites, where those sites could be and what kinds of uses. Basically, the goal is that the district would like to raise about $79 million in total from TDR sales. We know that the cost of the property, which was earlier pointed out, that purchase has been made. It was $155 million to purchase the 11.65 acres. The city is contributing $23 million toward joint use facilities, and they are purchasing 2 acres from the district at $20 million. So we still have a huge gap to fill just on the property purchase. And then on top of that, we don't yet know how big the school may be and how much it might cost, but it's reasonable to expect that that's going to be at least $60 million, if not $80 million by the time it's all said and done. So the district has relied on a previous bond measure that they did, I think, in 2014, if memory serves. But that bond measure was originally intended to not only fund the 10th school site, but to provide money for upgrades in other campuses. So the district board is really focused on leveraging the value of the TDRs to essentially make this project possible. And to put this in perspective, Mr. Geiser mentioned earlier, their purchase is about 25%. They are one of 3 developers that are either already approved or are facing approval, and that accounts for about 44% of that total financial goal. We've got 2 more projects that are in the review process with the city, which is another 25%. So for a variety of reasons, COVID has delayed things tremendously. The office market has gotten very uncertain. We're still without clear answers on where the final 30% of the TDR package is going to go. And that's our focus now, is how can we find the right projects in your community to make the district whole so they can fulfill their goals.
Peter, thank you very much for that. That's very helpful. So
sure,
appreciate
you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Dempsey, other questions?
Yes, I actually wanted to follow up on Commissioner Gutierrez's question. And forgive me because I'm relatively new and I understand very little about the TDR program. What does the delay in reaching sort of a complete sale and getting the whole 79 million, I think it is, that we're supposed to be collecting from this program, if that's delayed, how does that actually affect the building of the school site? Does it literally mean if it takes us 2 extra years to sell all that square footage, the building of the school is delayed? Or it sounds like the timing of the construction wouldn't be, we would just end up backfilling money somebody already spent. So help me understand how the full completion of the TDR program is going to end up influencing when they open the school doors, if at all.
Yeah, that's another excellent question. And that's exactly the question that the board is struggling with right now, is making sure that there's enough certainty about funding that they're able to commence construction and get a school open. The current goal is, I believe it's roughly 2025. We're at the very front end of planning. We're working with city staff on a master plan, which then will trigger conceptual design development, and all the different phases. The district is about to launch their CEQA review and an EIR for the project. So there's a lot of work to be done just to get to the point of being able to go out to bid and construct the project. But the board is, I think to their credit, being mindful that they need to know that even if they don't have all the money in hand, there's a path of certainty to it. So if there's a project that's moving toward entitlement in the city and the developer is ready to negotiate with the district on a purchase and sale agreement, that's the kind of certainty they're really looking for. I'm feeling that there's just, it's really hard right now because the office market, which has funded a big share of this, it really is uncertain. So that's what we're focused on. Your question is the one I hear every time I talk to the staff and the board over at the district.
Thank you, Mr. Ingram. That's really helpful.
Sure.
So any other commissioner questions before we open up to public comment? Okay. And we will open up public comment. Would any member of the public on the line like to provide comment on this item? If so, please click the raise hand button in Zoom or press *9 on your phone. Phone users can mute and unmute themselves with *6. EPC clerk will start the timer to let you know when your time is up. And I do, Ms. Horan, there were 2 members of the community that asked to be kind of back to back. Do you know who those are so they could be called in sequence?
I wasn't aware of anyone wishing to be back to back. But I do see Tim Mather and Michelle Boy.
Aaron, if you give me 1 moment, I can get you those things.
All right, then we'll call the first person.
Okay, would you like to do 3 minutes?
Yes, please.
Okay, I'll call Tim Mather.
Actually, please, Chair, myself and Michelle had requested to share a total of 6 minutes back to back, 3 minutes for each of us. Is that acceptable, please?
Okay, so you are the 2. All right.
Yes. I had provided the slides earlier. Pardon me, we had provided the slides earlier. Who's driving on the slides, please? Will that be from your end or is that from our end, please?
You have those, Rebecca?
I'm not in receipt of specific slides. Aaron, if it's possible to allow them to share the screen, that would be great. Thank you.
Sure. Do you have the ability, Tim? I think everyone...
Please give Michelle the ability. She's going to start, please.
Okay.
And then I'll pick up from her. So again, we're requesting permission to share 6 minutes total, please, Mr. Chair.
That's fine.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, and then share. How do I share the screen here? Okay. I'm not sure where I share the, oh, hold on. Let's do the view options. Let's see the view options.
Do you see the share screen tab at the bottom?
No.
No, it's not there for us, please.
Okay, 1 second.
We can only raise and lower our hand and mute and unmute.
Okay, 1 moment.
The slides were sent to the EPC, or pardon me, EVC email address.
Okay, do you see the share screen button now at the bottom? Tim or Michelle?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Sure. All right. Let's see. Okay. Are you able to see the slide? Okay, great. So good evening. My name is Michelle Oye, and I'm presenting with my neighbor, Tim Mather. We're residents at the Crossings, and both of us have lived in Mountain View for over 20 years. The reason we're speaking tonight is because we have seen an explosion of residential and retail construction along San Antonio Road with no significant changes made to the existing infrastructure. Specifically, these are the areas of infrastructure that are failing. One major failure is San Antonio Road. This is northbound traffic between the Jewish Day School and the Toyota dealership at 10:39 a.m. on a Tuesday. This is what we experience on a daily basis. On this map, we've labeled a 1.6-mile section of San Antonio Road that extends from El Camino to East Charleston. We're going to take a closer look at this section because it's the most impacted section and is the main outlet to Highway 101 for nearby residents of Mountain View, Palo Alto, and Los Altos. After reviewing the San Antonio Precise Plan, we have questions that we want answered. Why doesn't the plan contain a traffic analysis for San Antonio Road? What coordination has the City of Mountain View conducted with the City of Palo Alto and the City of Los Altos to address the traffic problem on San Antonio? There's an addendum to the plan, and in that addendum, it stated that the peak traffic on San Antonio Road will not exceed 44,000 vehicles per hour. We would like to know where that number came from. And as reference, the State Department of Transportation has stated that the peak traffic on Highway 85 in Mountain View is 7,000 vehicles per hour. So how is San Antonio Road able to handle 6 times the amount of traffic as Highway 85? Furthermore, in the same report, it states the following measures will reduce peak hour traffic by 30%. These measures include adding bicycle parking, providing on-site bicycle maintenance and repair. Where's the evidence and data supporting this conclusion? Again, we're seeing numbers in this plan that look like a cut and paste from some other report. This is a list of the recent development along that 1.6-mile stretch of San Antonio Road. You have the Village Center, 330 residential units. The Dean, 583 units. The Lansby, 632 units. The AC Hotel and the Hotel Citron. And these are the developments directly on San Antonio Road. This list does not include development nearby. So to summarize and address the other points of failure, I'm going to hand this over to Tim Mather, my neighbor, to continue.
Thank you, Michelle. Next slide, please.
Oops, sorry. Are you going to continue with me?
Yes, we'll just stay with you. So go for it. There you go.
Yep.
Okay, next slide, please.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Let me just summarize what Michelle just covered here. So the projects that have been either finished or are under consideration is a total of more than 2,000 residential units. That's apartments, condominiums, and hotel rooms. And again, as Michelle just stated, that's just directly along San Antonio Road, and that's in less than 10 years. It's not including any nearby developments, okay? I'll also stress that all of those residential units are additional, they're new. None of that is replacement housing off of that, okay? And that's just in, again, that 1.6 mile section of El Camino Real. I'd also like to stress, please, that these figures, all of this information comes from city documents, okay? It's our city's own documents that are making these claims, okay? The addendum, pardon me, but it's a sloppy cut and paste. So next slide, please. Okay. So several of these projects claim that they will be offsetting traffic by Caltrain ridership. And the city acknowledged those developer claims in its own documents off of that. And you can see a couple of the statements here from nearby developers. Okay. I would like to remind the commission, please, that San Antonio Road, the Caltrain station there, that's a limited station, meaning there's no Baby Bell service there yet. And it's already the 17th busiest station out of 31 total off of that. One of the trains that leaves San Antonio, the northbound 233 in the morning during rush hour, is already over capacity at 104%. It's one of the busiest trains that Caltrain runs, okay? So my question is, where does the city expect that traffic to be absorbed by Caltrain? And Caltrain is already stretched to the max. And again, those figures are coming straight from Caltrain, okay? That's the latest report that's available off of that. So, pardon me, trying to offset San Antonio Road traffic by Caltrain, pretty questionable off of that. Next slide, please. We have not a city responsibility directly, but certainly it impacts the city. And that is PG&E's absolutely terrible capacity planning. You'll notice then that in less than the last 2 years, we've had 13 outages, 13. Now, some of those have been quite short, 4 minutes, for example, just enough to trip the fire doors, just enough to trip the clocks and the appliances, and you have to reset them. And some of them, pardon me, some of those have been several hours long. This is terrible, okay? And that's, the numbers there are coming from PG&E voicemail messages, which actually provide the number of customers that are impacted. And customer in this case equals a household or a business. So if we were to times that, for example, by 3, you get the total number of individuals who are impacted. This is just completely unacceptable. Next slide, please.
We've come to the 6 minutes. Sorry.
Okay. So thank you for your comments. We can share your slides with the rest of the commission.
Please do.
Yep.
Thank you for your time.
Is there anyone else from the public wishing to speak on this item?
I do not see anybody else.
All right, then we'll bring it back to the commission for discussion, deliberation, and action. So who would like to go first? Commissioners? Vice Chair, yeah.
I'm just going to go back to my original one so I don't forget it. And it was in regards to the ground floor plane. I appreciate that the development team had taken the council's comments into consideration and set back the ground floor. I see that there are a lot of positives to that. I would just kind of put out a little bit of a warning. I love that there are a lot more plantings, but I'm trying to figure out how to best balance, and this is a question for you guys, the designers, how to best balance the amount of new planters, which is great. However, I worry that it's splitting the difference of the sidewalk width into two kind of narrow pieces instead of one big wide one. I see the benefit of, you know, kind of creating spaces for potential restaurants, but I also worry perhaps that it blocks the view of the retail shops, which is what is desired by being on the road. So it's just striking that balance. It's more of something to please think about carefully. I noticed when walking the promenade area, there are a lot of like little obstacles on the sidewalk in the pedestrian way. Sometimes there's a big planter and you can barely walk around it, especially at the corners. I think that is probably a key area to watch for, and not have a planter that blocks you from going directly crossing the street to the either direction of the sidewalk. People like to just kind of go straight. So I guess it's just one comment to be wary, to please strike a balance between adding planters and allowing for sort of natural wide sidewalks that people can pass through, go around the building easily, and not have to like traverse too many obstacles, and have those planters sort of block what you are aiming for, which is to get people to see the retail and have that retail be engaging.
I could ask for just, sorry, one point of clarity from Commissioner Yin. Are you referring specifically to like the modular planters that are sort of placed out sort of in hardscaped areas, or are you speaking to kind of the green spaces and sort of built-in planting areas that are part of the projects?
Well, street trees are natural. It's sort of the new little amoeba-shaped planters. You know, if you even mound it up a little too high and then add a tree and shrubs that's like 4 feet or even taller, that's blocking the view of the retail spaces, which is counter to what retail usually wants. And also, given that we just added this extra space, I understand the desire to add more plantings, and that's great to have that, but we were adding it in order to get very comfortable widths for people to walk back and forth. And I'm just a little bit worried that now we're creating like little narrow areas that you have to choose to go left or right. And it doesn't feel like it's one wide sidewalk. It's just two narrow ones. I know you can get through. There are sort of breakpoints. So that was one concern. And the second factor was just really when you're crossing the sidewalk and you get to the corner, you really don't want that corner blocked. You want to be able to feel like you're getting to the corner and then you can go in whichever direction you want. So there are like 3 corners that are kind of blocked off. And I just worry that it's actually creating a separation between the right retail and the street, sort of the public space.
May I chime in here? One of the big changes we made between the last go round and this go round is we used to have planters up above the walking surface, and that we took all those planters and put them into the garage. So they're really just mounds coming out of the ground, and those mounds are not higher than say 12 inches, 16 inches. So we subterranean those planters so that it would be more natural mounds. And it's really just to make sure that the space doesn't feel too hard, because it needs to have a little bit of buffer. But I don't know that it's going to be a blockage like you're concerned about. I think we've done quite a bit of work with our landscape designer to address very exactly that, because we have the same concerns. We don't want to see any blockages between the two either. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fulbright. It was just something to point out, to be aware of. Obviously in plan, it looks like a potential blockage, and you know how people, they will cut across things and make their own trail, and so I worry for these 3 places. If it's too low, people might walk through. If it's too high, then it's just an impediment. And I say that because I think it's like across the street, somewhere in the promenade, the office sort of plaza area, there are some planters that literally will impede the sidewalk. You have, when you're trying to cross the street, it's in the way. So there are a lot of little obstacles here and there with potted plants and the like. It's kind of hard to tell where you're supposed to walk if each area is a little narrow. And so I don't want to lose anything by adding too much planters. I didn't think I'd hear myself say that. I love plants, but just note to strike a balance.
Commissioner Dempsey.
Yeah, so I'm back on traffic. So given the concerns that were expressed, a few minutes ago about traffic on San Antonio, and I myself have driven down San Antonio enough to know that it's not a concern that's completely unfounded. To staff, I mean, would a traffic study be helpful or appropriate, or is there a reason that one is not currently included? I'd just be curious to know sort of the logic of the apparent lack of concern around traffic impacts from this particular development.
So traffic analysis was conducted. There's a multimodal transportation analysis that is part of the addendum, or that supports the addendum to the EIR that was prepared for this project. The analysis itself, though, is looking specifically at whether this project as a whole would cause any new or substantially greater impacts to traffic than were analyzed during the original San Antonio Precise Plan EIR. And the conclusions of that analysis, because the San Antonio Precise Plan EIR actually analyzed upwards of 800,000 square feet of office development in the plan area, is that this project would not cause a new or substantially greater impact than what we had previously studied.
So the problem may be bad, but this doesn't necessarily make it appreciably worse?
Correct.
Thank you.
Other discussions come from commissioners? Or Commissioner Dempsey, do you have more? Or? Well, I'll discuss. So, I mean, overall, I think the work that was done to try to add more sidewalk space, I think, is good. I do agree with some of Commissioner Yin's concern that it's, instead of being big, wider sidewalks, it's a couple of sidewalks side by side with connections, and so just making sure that goal of enough width between the public access and the area underneath along the building combined is easily enough for people to get through those breaks is a good thing. I don't personally feel that the visual size and scale of the building feels any different than the earlier one did. It looks different. The curves certainly make it more interesting, but I don't know that the feeling of scale has been achieved yet. I know the staff report mentioned that there'd be additional items in the development, in the design review process to kind of look at the upper floors. I would certainly support that activity. I don't know that that's necessarily a reason to say no at this point, but it doesn't necessarily, the massing doesn't feel any smaller to me or less impactful than the earlier one did necessarily. But the pedestrian environment, I think, was achieved. The landscaping element seems to be better. The ground floor space was dealt with. The setbacks were dealt with. The curves definitely make it a little less, office building in its approach. I do have a bit of concern if we're dependent on the tenant of building 2 to be the gate for the traffic into the space. I don't know that agreement, how it works, but certainly making sure that whatever is done there, that if there happens to not be a tenant in that space, or that it's divided among multiple tenants rather than right now Facebook is a single tenant, they can control it. But if it's divided up for some reason, making sure that flexibility of getting people off of San Antonio into the parking lot and vice versa in the evenings, I think needs to somehow continue to be there. And so I don't know if that's in the development agreement or what, but somehow to make sure that doesn't go away. If it's working, great, but there's the fact that it's a single tenant right now, I'm worried that is a reason it may be working and other conditions might not make it work. So overall, I'm inclined to support the project, even though not everything it's an interesting building. Is it my definition of icon? Not really, but I wouldn't want an Eiffel Tower here either anyway. So it's good enough for me. So Commissioner Clark.
Yeah, I feel similarly. Remembering back to 2020 and the comments that were made then, and sorry for the background noise. Apparently, someone's throwing a party that I wasn't invited to. I remember, really wanting to break down some of those corners and trying to round out the design so that it didn't just look like a box next to a box. And I think you've done a really great job at addressing that, adding some more interest to the building itself, creating a better pedestrian experience. I think I was one of the folks at the time who brought up the thought of trying to create some sort of way for pedestrians, either through the building or through some sort of promenade to access the other portion of the promenade that we had tried to activate in prior phases. And I think one of the benefits of the recent site visit for me was really seeing the new residential complex across California coming to fruition, and that pedestrian promenade connecting across, and it's starting to feel to me like that will be more of a primary pedestrian bike corridor into the project and into the retail than from that corner. And so while it's important that I think that corner be unique and visually interesting and draw folks into those retail tenants, I'm starting to feel like maybe it isn't the end of the world if we don't have that interior path of travel for folks to follow, and that activating those wider sidewalks is a better way to go, as you stated, and then understanding the constraints on space that you have there too. I do understand, with any project, especially around this particular area and all the development that's gone on there, the concerns about traffic impacts and parking and the logistics, and wanting to ensure that we don't create backups, especially losing a lane in San Antonio with folks pulling into parking areas. I think, granted, we haven't had the best data over the last couple of years with COVID, but I think pre-COVID, with Facebook there, I think we had a sense of how the TDM plans really play out when you have a major tenant there. And I don't think all the concerns there really came to fruition. And I think the TDM programs work. So I'm a little bit more comfortable there. And as staff pointed out, we studied, more office than this under the precise plan, and ultimately I think decided that the precise plan would have a lower cap on office, and then we did this supplemental study here for this particular project to make sure that it wouldn't create any significant overriding impacts beyond what we'd studied in the precise plan, and it sounds like it won't. So I think this is one of the last key pieces to at least this section of the overall plan coming to fruition. And I think a lot of progress has been made. I agree with the direction that staff's provided in terms of things that we should look at going forward, or as the design is finalized. And overall, I'm willing to support the staff recommendation, and I'm willing to make the motion once we've had a few more comments and get a sense for where everyone else stands.
Commissioner Nunez.
Yeah, I also don't have many bad things to say about the project. In fact, positive things. I do very much like the change in design. It's definitely an improvement from the prior iteration. I do appreciate the activation. I think that was a very conscious effort to make it very pedestrian friendly, accessible, make it look vibrant. It seems like it's going to slot right into that corner. I personally am always concerned about the impacts to infrastructure. I've driven down San Antonio at different times of the day, and it can definitely be pretty painful. That said, I think that solving the problem of infrastructure is definitely its own beast that has to be tackled, and a very worthwhile one at that. And while definitely office space, whether or not the shift in working location habits, reorients to something approaching what it used to be before COVID. While I'm definitely very much not, predisposed to appreciating new office development, new commercial development, which I personally think we have more than enough of in this city and regionally. I do appreciate the element of the transfer development rights that would facilitate the acquisition of a school site. So in that vein, I think it's a unique benefit that we're getting from this project, which for all intents and purposes, with all the other reasons noted, I'm very much willing to support the recommendation as provided by staff.
Question from other commissioners. Commissioner Dempsey.
Sure. So I think all things considered, I like it. I actually think it's pretty design. I appreciate the the curvature in the glass, and definitely looks sort of fitting for Silicon Valley. I'm glad to see there's going to be more trees there than before. That's always more trees is always good. I'm grateful that the applicants were thoughtful about parking and making that work, and I always happy to see underground parking. I even kind of find the jewel box sort of appealing, and I look forward to going and getting coffee at one of those jewel boxes at some point in the future. I'm especially glad to see money flowing into Los Altos School District to support the building of that school. That's actually really good news, and I want to keep hearing more about that program. But I'm really glad that this is going to help build that school. I'm looking forward to taking my coffee and walking over to look at that beautiful school. And then finally, just to staff, I'm grateful for the thought that has gone into studying the larger traffic problem there on that corridor. Maybe at some point we got to go bang on Caltrain's door to get more service at the station or something. But I'm grateful that so much thought has gone into that already. And in general, I'm looking forward to being able to support this today.
Commissioner Gutierrez.
Chair, Commissioner Haymeyer was first.
She dropped off, and then go ahead. Commissioner Gutierrez, you're next.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. When you have this type of project, you're going to have a lot of pros and cons. It looks like the previous members of City Council and of this commission looked into issues that were then tackled on by staff and by the developers, and they've done their best to try and revise to bring something new to the city. And that issue of traffic is always going to be there, and it's one that should be shared in general. But I think we should put some perspective on it, that it's really hard, but not impossible, to try and get cities to cooperate with one another. I think the issue is just that when you have more than 2 cities involved, it's more of a challenge than what you think, because you've got traffic that's not just impeding progress to 101 on that neck of the road of San Antonio, but also Shoreline, right? And other avenues that we have. And we've seen this before, because you've got Los Altos, you've got Palo Alto, you've got Mountain View, and that's a lot of vehicles that use these main areas to get to these places. But having said that, it looks for a corner building. It looks like it fits in right next to Icon. And that movie theater has a different design all of in itself. That area is forming along, forming something new, something fresh that hasn't been seen before in Mountain View, that sometimes you may see in Palo Alto, or you see sometimes some iterations of it way back in the day when Santana Row was first brought in, right? And commissioners, I believe Yan had mentioned something about wide pathways, similar to what they have down there. And I completely understand why that would be important for members of the community to be able to walk in that area and feel comfortable to go to any spot without feeling impediment, especially when you factor in the residential community that's being built right across the way. These are challenging times, but these are also fun times, because you're seeing progress being made step by step. I'm in favor of the project. I appreciate the time and effort that's been contributed by everyone to make this happen, and I'm looking forward to see what's next.
Commissioner Haymeyer.
Thank you, and thanks for the significant amount of work that's gone into this project since it was last before the commission in 2020. Like many have mentioned, I appreciate the pedestrian improvements, and I think my larger concern with Merlone-Geyer had been trying to think about the natural pathways that people make in between the different components, particularly in a phased approach. And so I think those improvements in this iteration are significant and notable. The massing does, to me, show improvements. It doesn't quite look as imposing as the earlier design. And I really like that the advanced planning was invested into to figure out the shared parking. And like the Chair Cranston says, I do hope that regardless of who is owning and occupying these buildings, that continues to be an arrangement that is able to move forward. Overall, I'm comfortable with the exceptions that are being asked for height and FAR to accommodate the TDRs. I've been holding back a little bit. I'm curious to hear the commissioners, because to me, the original visual design is more is something I would prefer. I think as we've talked about, iconic is subjective, and I think a lot of effort had been invested in to try and accommodate what the direction had been from council. I'd like to flag the comments that we received from Ronit Bryan. I don't know that this is the corner that seems to fit with this project to me, but I know there are architects and designers and people who have spent a lot more time and effort on this. Overall, I'm fine to support the project, but I would like to hear a little bit more public comment about whether this fits into the neighborhood. I know we've wanted for some time to see different architecture that makes it more interesting and exciting, but in this particular project, in this context, with what's happening across the street with the Gray Star development, the curved linear nature just doesn't work for me. But it does not seem, I feel like I'm the lone voice on that, and appreciate that so many people have been working to try and make this iconic. And I'm excited to see the final phase of Merlone-Geyer come together and support LAST.
Commissioner Clark.
So I guess I'll go ahead and maybe the city attorney's office can help me. Is it okay if I move that the Environmental Planning Commission recommend to the City Council the staff recommendations as printed in the staff report, or do you need me to read those aloud?
I think what you propose, Commissioner, is sufficient.
Okay, thank you.
Do I have a second? No second. Commissioner Dempsey.
Second.
That your, I didn't hear you, Commissioner. Are you seconding?
That's a second.
Thanks. All right. All right. Then, Ms. Horan, can you call the roll, please?
Sure. Commissioner Gutierrez.
Aye.
Commissioner Haymeyer.
Aye.
Commissioner Nunez.
Aye.
Commissioner Clark.
Aye.
Commissioner Dempsey.
Aye.
Vice Chair Yin.
Aye.
And Chair Cranston.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, thank you, everyone. And we will now move on to item 6, Commission staff announcements, update, requests, and committee reports. Just to note that no actions will be taken on any questions raised by the Commission during this section. So any updates, reports from staff or Commission members?
The only thing I'll add at the request of Eric Anderson is just to mention that we are planning to hold the May 4th EPC meeting. So we will have at least one agendized item for that night.
No other announcements? And have you, I guess maybe whether anybody has heard, is there, Eric mentioned last time that there was still discussion on how face-to-face might come back? Is that discussion, the city manager's office still progressing? Have they have any decisions on trying it with council at this point, or is that still very much up in the air?
My understanding is that it's something that's being actively monitored. Ultimately, city council has to formally evaluate it on a 30-day basis under provisions from the state. But that virtual meetings will continue at this point, at least through around mid-May, and council will next evaluate whether it continues past that date at an early meeting in May.
Thank you. Commissioner Gutierrez.
Yes, Alex had brought up this issue before, so I'd like for him to be able to expound on it because it was his idea. But in the prior meeting, we had asked if the city had been able to reach the family that was over by Latham and Escuela, and I believe there's been an update. Alex, if you'd like to do the honors and share what's been relayed to us.
If I recall correctly, at the last meeting, we were able to confirm that the family did get contacted.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. If there's no other comments, then we will adjourn the Mountain View Environmental Planning Commission meeting at 8:42 p.m. The next meeting is scheduled for May 4th, 2022. Thank you, everyone, and have a great night.